So welcome back to Everything Marketplaces, where we talk with founders and leaders from some of today's top marketplaces. So this is episode 108, which is a really great group chat that we just had with Vishal Kapoor, who's the director of product at Shipt. So Shipt is enabling personalized shopping and delivery through its curated marketplace of retailers nationwide. So prior to Shipt, Vishal was a product lead at Lyft, where he's working on marketplace pricing and intelligence. So he has some really incredible experience when it comes to both product and marketplaces. So this is a really great chat with Vishal, where we got to learn more about his previous experience at Lyft. Now at Shipt, did a deep dive on Shipt as a three-sided marketplace, got to learn some unique product insights, and also had a really great Q&A. So I really enjoyed this conversation, and you're going to find it a great watch to the end. So Vishal, welcome to the group chat. You have some pretty incredible product experience at marketplaces like Lyft and now Shipt, which is a three-sided marketplace. So I'm really excited to have you join us here today and learn more about it. Before we jump into things, though, I think it might be great if you can start off by sharing a little bit more on your background, though, for those that don't know you.
Sure thing. Thanks, Mike, for having me. It's really nice to be here. As far as my background, I am an engineer turned product leader. I started my career as a software engineer with Amazon. That was the first marketplace that I worked for right out of graduate school. I went to graduate school in the US, got a master's in computer science. And then from there, from Amazon, I worked for a couple of search engines, Yahoo Search, Bing Search, writing software, writing code for them. Eventually, I think the bug bit me, and then I pivoted, moved over to the other side. I moved over to the business side of things. I was always interested in sort of being an entrepreneur, in being more on the cutting edge of ideas versus cutting edge of technology. That's just naturally who I am. So I moved over. I started with gaming, a company called Zynga, and they have a game called Words with Friends, which is you're playing Scrabble with other people on the phone, essentially. So started there, started my PM career there. Was a lot of fun, because it's really not a regulated industry if you think about it, unlike finance or healthcare or, rideshare, where there are so many rules. So started there, learned a lot through pushing product and launching product for games. And then I moved on to Lyft, was my coming full circle back to a marketplace. And then after Lyft, I think it was too good for me to kind of look back after that. So I moved on to then I'm currently at Shipt. I'm a director of product here. Shipt is also a on-demand online offline marketplace. Like rideshare. This is a grocery delivery marketplace. I'm a director of product here, and have a few teams, and it's incredibly exciting to work in this space for me. So.
Yeah, certainly. And sounds like a really incredible background. So thanks for sharing with us on that. So going back to your time at Lyft, what were you working on there? Maybe what were some of the challenges with it as a marketplace at the time?
So at Lyft, I was focused on, I'm also focused on the same thing at Shipt. At Lyft, I was primarily focused on two areas. One was pricing, and this was pricing on the supply side, meaning what do you pay the drivers, right? The gig side of the business. How do you pay that? And if you think about it, if you could argue that really pricing is really the main reason why people come and work for a on-demand marketplace like Lyft or Shipt, because what they get paid as a result of that, the economic opportunity, is the reason why they actually come and work for you. So incredibly important role. I worked as part of the pricing team. I dealt with what we called as competitive prices, meaning how are we paying versus our competitors? How do you benchmark that? How do you make sure that in the rideshare world, or generally in the on-demand world, you call it as multi-homing. How do you, prevent multi-homing? How do you increase loyalty with your own business, for example, through pricing? Again, as I said, arguably pricing is the last lever that you can pull, right? If you pay more money, more people will come and work for you. I think that anybody can, associate with that. So that, and then the other team that I also worked with was called Marketplace Intelligence, which was a lot of analytics and business intelligence, really looking at numbers and enabling the leadership at the company to look at numbers so that they can run the business intelligently. So those two things, I think the unique use cases some of the unique use cases there were Lyft and Uber really are they were one of their kind. Now there are more marketplaces like that. But at the time, especially things like surge pricing, which were such a unique concept. It was a little. It depends on who you ask, whether that is a good or a bad, whether it is a for good or for evil. If you depending on if you ask the rider, if you ask the driver. But the concept of surge pricing to bring what we used to call an equilibrium back to the marketplace, right? In your economics 101 sense, working on those problems, balancing out supply and demand, using pricing as a sort of the pivot point of balancing supply and demand. Using that to figure out how to mitigate undersupply or supply shortages. What do you do when there is an excess demand but you don't have enough supply? How do you kind of balance that out? Using those kind of techniques, using those kind of mechanisms, Lyft and Uber were really the first ones to kind of pioneer those, and I got to work on some of those problems. That was incredibly exciting.
Yeah, no, definitely sounds super interesting. Pricing comes up some, but not as much as it probably should here. So I would actually love to learn a little bit more about that. And you did mention as far as how you can use pricing to kind of balance liquidity. So could you maybe could we go a little bit deeper on that, and you could share an example?
I think there is a quote. There is a talk that I have given in the past. It's called Surge Pricing 0 to 1. And the idea of the talk, the gist of the talk is how would you build a surge pricing engine? Assume that you are a new startup. I think one of the goals of these conversations for you is for new people, for new startup founders, marketplace founders. You want to give them tips and techniques as to how to think about some of these problems. Now, pricing, as you rightfully pointed out, it is an area of technology which is sort of very arcane, right? It's sort of limited to the domain of mathematicians and statisticians and computer scientists. So I try to demystify that from a business perspective, what that really means. So let me just give you a 40,000-foot view of that means. So really what happens if you go back to our economics 101, really what happens is that the idea is really very simple, is that there are generally there are two players to a marketplace. There's a supply side and the demand side. So supply side is somebody who's let's take Lyft as an example. Supply side is the drivers who are actually fulfilling the cars and the capacity, and the demand side is people like us who are consumers, generally, who are requesting the ride. Now, as I was referring to a minute ago, generally sometimes what happens is that the marketplace is operating at a steady state, right? Which is what you use, the word you used is liquidity. So there is good liquidity in the marketplace, meaning one way of sort of going down one level. Good liquidity means that the orders that are coming in or the demand that is coming in is clearing at a rate of a steady state. Like there's no bad service quality, there's no unmet demand, there's no unsatisfied supply. Generally speaking, both sides are satisfied. I think things start to go wrong when one of them goes out of whack. For example, you had a baseball game or you had a rock concert, and then now suddenly everybody is kind of exiting out of the venue and everybody wants a ride. At that point, there is a demand spike. So how do you plan for that? How do you anticipate that? Either you plan for it ahead of time, or you need to have systems which in real time will be reactive and very, very fast, so that you can actually, the real goal behind surge pricing is, this is a little ironic. People who are, from the technology industry will probably understand this, but for a general consumer, it's not how it is perceived, unfortunately. So the goal of surge pricing is not to make money. It's not to make money. It's not to exploit, people there's a high demand and you're trying to exploit and make more revenue because there is a high demand. That's not the goal. The goal is to actually restore the balance of supply and demand. And generally, and the way it works is, so this situation where there's a spike in demand and there aren't enough drivers in the Lyft scenario, same thing in the Shipt scenario, for example. But in that scenario, what you do is you also simultaneously raise prices. And the idea is that people who feel like they don't need that service urgently will either choose to wait, or they will just drop out of the marketplace completely, right? Like I think we can identify with what we're saying, right? Which is, I can wait for the prices are very high right now for Lyft. I'm okay to wait for like 15, 20 minutes, for example. I'll try again after 15 or 20 minutes. Or, you know what, I'm just going to take the bus. I don't even care about like the prices that abnormally high. Generally, that's what happens. The goal of surge pricing is to really just focus on the urgent demand. And by the way these marketplaces work, or generally any marketplaces, they are sort of the connectors, right? So this marketplace is then Lyft as a marketplace is then going to offload that money that is coming in, the incoming revenue. It's going to try and offload that to the supply side, to the drivers. And so their payouts also go up. And so the idea is that one side, you're increasing the cost so that the non-urgent demand drops off. On the other hand, you're actually increasing the payouts so that the supply, more drivers are motivated to actually come to the marketplace. And then basically you kind of level out at a certain price point. You level that out, and then you bring liquidity and try and bring the marketplace back to steady state. So again, as I said, really, really interesting problems. One of the things we used to say at Lyft, and it's true, which is a little ironic, is the goal of surge is to get out of surge. It's not to keep surging. So, the goal of surge is to get out of surge. So yeah, some of those problems are something that we see at Lyft at Shipt as well. And it's a very interesting and exciting space to work in.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, that's a great explanation. So thanks for walking us through it. That's a good transition, from Lyft into to Shipt. So, what led you to joining the Shipt team?
Well, I'm obviously biased, so I'll first say that before answering the question. But in some sense, I think Shipt is a harder problem than rideshare, because not only because there are three sides to Shipt. So just by way of introduction, what Shipt is, it's a grocery delivery marketplace. So I think a close comparison is DoorDash or Uber Eats, or really our one of our direct competitors is Instacart, for people who know Instacart. DoorDash and Uber Eats are different because they do restaurant pickups and deliveries. Like you're picking up a pre-prepared item. So it's more like pickup and deliveries. Versus for Shipt, there is a shopping component involved. So somebody going into the store, physically into the store. One way of describing it would be, they used for Uber early on in the early days, they used sort of the tagline of your personal driver. I think this an easy way to grok this is you would call it as your personal shopper, for example. That's what Shipt is. So there are three sides to it. There is a customer that places the order. There is the retail store or the grocery store where the order is being shopped from or picked up from. And then there is the fulfillment side, which is the shopper side, which is actually taking the order, going and doing the shopping, and then going and doing the delivery to the customers, right? So those are the three sides. So it is harder from Lyft, not only because there is an extra side, which is the retailer side, right? There's, besides the supply and demand, now there's the inventory or the catalog side, which in and of itself is a hard problem to manage. If you think about it, how do you ensure that people are not allowed to place orders or pick items when placing orders, which are not even available in the store right now? How do you keep that updated real time? It's a pretty hard problem to solve, because that creates a very bad customer experience, right? Because if you constantly place orders in a system which allows you to do that, based on if it cannot forecast what is the current level of inventory, and you keep only getting up 10% of your orders or 20% of your orders of everything that you ordered, you are not going to use that service again. The satisfaction of that service is going to be super poor, right? It's not going to be very great for you. So not only because of that, but actually the other interesting twist, which I came to appreciate at Shipt after a while, is that it's really, Shipt is actually something between an Uber and an Amazon, if you think about it. So what do I mean by that? So it is like Uber in the sense that when an order needs to, so you assume that you are a customer and you have placed an order. So generally what happens is, you're a busy guy, you're working right now. Generally, let's say that you expect your order to be delivered, let's say at a certain time. Let's say you say that, between 6 to 7 p.m. for various reasons. The order might have ice cream, and you don't want somebody to drop off the order on your front door and then the ice cream would melt. So you need to be there. There needs to be some contract. There needs to be some agreement of what window do you want the delivery to happen, so that you can go and put the groceries away, essentially, right? So one thing is that because of that, when you specify that you need the order to be delivered at a certain time, that in that sense it is close to Uber. because a shopper needs to be available at that point. The fulfillment is real time. The shopper needs to be available at that time, go and shop the order around that time, come and deliver it. So the fulfillment needs to happen there. But it is like Amazon, because the order doesn't actually come, like 10 minutes before what you expect, or 15 minutes. The consumer expectation is not there yet. Like I would argue, in the audience, how many of us actually put a grocery order and expect it to be delivered within the next 10 or 15 minutes? We are not there yet. So, long story short, the demand comes ahead of time, which is there is a lead time to the demand coming in, but the supply or the fulfillment needs to happen in real time. So it's a combination of those two, which is what actually makes, which I came to appreciate after a little bit at the company. It actually makes the problem harder than a Lyft or an Uber, for example. So
yeah, it definitely sounds like it. If two-sided marketplaces aren't hard enough, add another side, it's certainly challenging.
That's exactly
so I would love to go a little bit deeper in some of the specific aspects of it as a marketplace. I was kind of researching it a little bit in advance, and saw that you do as far as routing and kind of batching orders. Could you maybe share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, couple things here. It's a very big topic. Routing in and of itself, vehicle routing, or routing somebody along a path, is a deep topic, not only in business but also a deep topic in computer science, right? Like from my academic training, how do you design algorithms which can do that very efficiently? And it's generally it's supposed to be a hard problem in computer science to solve, to get all the routes exactly right, within a reasonable amount of time. Without geeking out too much on that, there are two things that I think I can cover in routing and batching, like you said. So one part is I own the product at Shipt, which is responsible for batching orders together. So I think essentially, just to paint the context, the use case is simple. An order is placed into your let's call it a marketplace. So your order is placed into the marketplace, and now there are many, many orders. There's a pool of orders. And what you are trying to do is, do you want to give one order to one shopper at one time? Let's say that it is at a store, and it needs to be delivered around a neighborhood at a certain time. Do you want to just do that one-on-one, or do you want to maybe try and find other orders which are at the same store, need to be delivered around the same place at the same time? How do you kind of like manage that use case? So one part is batching, which is how do you kind of club those orders together? And then the second part is actually routing and actually going and delivering them, right? So both are hard problems, but for batching, we do take what comes into account, which so thinking of it in terms of the two sides. In this case, as I said, right, there are three sides. So in this case, the orders are already in the marketplace. So let's say that the inventory side is off the table, because let's say that you have forecasted properly, that the items that somebody is ordering are in stock right now, or are expected to be in stock when they will be shopped, right? Let's just say that side of the marketplace is off the table. Now let's talk about the other two sides, right? So batching. So if you batch, there are two things. Let's go over it one by one. So let's look at the shoppers and let's look at the customers. If you batch, one of two things can happen with the shoppers. It might just take them too long, because there are sometimes, your algorithms could go amok, and you might batch 5, 10, 20 orders. You have to draw a reasonable amount of a reasonable boundary somewhere, because remember that there is a certain time, as we set the context, there is a 6 to 7 p.m. window, let's say, that you want the orders to be delivered. Now, if the shopper is going to spend 5 hours in just shopping so many orders, they're not going to be able to deliver it in a reasonable amount of time. So that is a limitation. So, we do hear this from our shoppers, by the way, that sometimes it's like the orders are too big. I had to stand in checkout line multiple times. Everybody wants their own receipt, right? I mean, whether the orders are batched or unbatched, you and I as a customer, if our orders get batched, we will need our independent receipts in case we want to make returns or anything like that, exchanges or returns. So so checkouts are separate. So all of that needs to happen, right? Just to walk you through the use case. So now it becomes, one of the things is what do we actually club? What do we batch together? Like, do we batch many orders together? Do we batch something with a very, very heavy, item load? For example, it's not uncommon. For example, this is a this is how, some sort of, I guess, abuse or some sort of exploitation of the marketplace happens. It's not uncommon for people to order, 20 bags of mulch through Shipt, right? For example, and they are just paying for shipping, for example. It's just a very, very heavy order. And then how do you motivate shoppers to actually, how do you compensate them fairly? And if there is 20 bags of mulch, you're probably not going to be able to fit anything else physically in your car. How do we make sure we understand how much the car can hold? Can it even hold 20 bags before we match this order with the shopper, or before we batch the orders together? So all these problems we have to think of hard at the time of batching. So that's one part. And as I was saying, so one part is whether the shopper can do it, whether this is feasible for the shopper. And the second part is if they don't do it, if we overcome it or overpromise due to the batching, when we batch, then the members will not get their orders in time, and then they will not be satisfied. And retail is one of the gold standards of retail is, if you promise something will be delivered at a certain time, you have to actually stick with that promise. So otherwise, that's just how retail works today. That's just the precedent for Amazon and everybody. USPS, you take anything, when it's promised, the delivery is promised, you have to meet the delivery promise. So that could suffer, they could suffer on that side as well. So just taking batching, right? This is one example where it can go really south. And then very quickly covering routing, which was the other thing we talked about. One of the things that we saw at Lyft, and there is a blog about this, I encourage people to read it. It's from the data science team at Lyft. But if you think about Uber Pool or Lyft Line was the same equivalent product at Lyft called Lyft Line, which is, it's the same idea as batching, right? Which is, a rider or a couple, or a couple of riders are actually going in a certain direction. Can we actually utilize the capacity more? Can we actually pool more riders into the same car, up to 4 riders, let's say, in a small car or in a sedan? Can we pool up to 4 people in a sedan so that we can actually increase capacity of that, and we don't just have like empty vehicles routing around, because it creates traffic and so on and so forth. One of the problems that came up at Lyft, which we actually see here as well, sometimes come up at Shipt, and we work on constantly. So for shared rides, a simple problem was users, the first person who's in the car would be extremely disappointed if the car went in a opposite direction to do the second pickup compared to the direction that they wanted to go. So let's say if they were south and the car wanted to go north, and if the car went like a minute south, 1 more minute south to pick up the second party, and then started going north. Now, let's say that their original journey was, let's say, 10 minutes, and then going, south 1 minute and then coming back. So that takes it 12 minutes. That makes it to 12 minutes. They were extremely dissatisfied. They were okay if you went in the same direction 5 minutes away, like 5, 10, 15 minutes away sometimes. You could go you could take a tangent like somewhere else, but not reverse. If you went anywhere reverse, that would actually create, that would actually dissatisfy them. It's something similar that we see in our marketplace as well. Sometimes what happens is that there is a store where a shopper will pick up an order, and then we would actually route them. This happens sometimes, we would route them in one direction to drop off one, and then they have to cross the store and go and drop off because the other person is actually across the store. Now, there are no other orders in the store at the time. We already batched the orders that we had, but the shoppers are dissatisfied that you made me cross the store. Why couldn't you give me another order? Well, there wasn't any, right? So these type of problems that we see, and we have to actually program our algorithms for user experience. The way we say it is, we almost under optimize. So if we knew that this was the shortest distance, that this was the fastest time that the shopper could take, sometimes we would actually make it we would actually under optimize and make it a little bit longer so that we can take the user experience into account. If that answers the question. These are all fascinating problems to solve in the marketplace.
Oh, certainly. And, so many different use cases and, challenges. And so I guess to, bring it back full circle too, pricing is a kind of a lever you can use to kind of help manage that when it comes to the supply side too, I'm assuming on the batching and ordering.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. Some people are okay doing small orders, which will not have a large payout. Some people only want to do large orders. Some people want to do very, very large orders. Like there are the two categories of the two use cases that Shipt really solves today, and the two categories of problems is one, as I said, is the main category where Shipt started is your shop and deliver. So you're going into the store, you're shopping it and delivering it. Then one of the new areas is what we call as delivery only, which is, you're picking up what we call as a big package, which consists of many orders. So you're picking up a big, something like Amazon. You're picking up a big package from a retailer, from a third party with many orders, and now you're just driving around. So you don't really care about. There are two classes of supply side on our side. So one are the shoppers, and one is what we call as the drivers only. They just want to pick up. They don't care about going into a store, but they want to spend like 4 or 5 hours driving around the city and actually dropping off the orders. So yes, so the way we price them, the way the rates work for both of them, right? Because one has more associated costs of higher vehicular wear and tear. It's more gas mileage. It's more, how do we actually compensate drivers on that side versus how do we compensate shoppers on this side? Because they are spending more time in the first example, more time actually shopping the orders versus driving. In the second example, there is no shopping, there's only driving. So how do we actually balance that out? It all plays out through pricing. There are differentiated rates and so on.
Yeah, certainly. So you kind of mentioned categories, but for a little bit of context, how many markets do you operate in?
We are only in North America. And the way we say it is we have an internal, internal geographies is what we call it as a metro. We operate in about 300 metros. Now the metro could be, a large metro, a small metro. It's not by zip codes or anything. It's not anything logical like that. We have our own segmentation. So,
and then, on that note too, as far as, localized marketplaces and, not all markets are kind of created equal.
Yes.
So what are some metrics and kind of KPIs? And we can just maybe a little bit more generally speaking, or from your time at Lyft, if that's better. But that you use to kind of measure, some of the I guess the markets, how healthy those markets are.
I'll give you an example. I'll come back to an example of price. I'll use an anecdote from Lyft. There were really two KPIs that we were, indexed on, and it's the reason I'm starting there. It's almost the same thing at Shipt as well. So I'll first give you a Lyft example, which is more relatable, and then we can come back to Shipt. So there were two KPIs that we were always monitoring, and both the KPIs were really what we called as what we termed as our service quality KPIs or service level KPIs. Right. So the first one was your expected time of pickup. So you, as a rider, if you place a request in the Lyft, with Lyft to go from point A to point B, how soon would you actually have somebody come and pick you up? So that was first, and the second was obviously price. Right. Like in the area of price, it's like how price sensitive are you? Given a point in time, given the urgency, are you willing to wait? So if we pitch a certain price to you, will you be willing to wait, or will you just drop out? And, the goal is obviously to maximize revenue by maximizing the rides, maximizing the volume. But so depending on, some people are willing to spend more, some people are not willing to spend more. And machine learning algorithms will actually learn that over time as they learn your behavior, et cetera, et cetera. The first one is very interesting, and I'll just quickly, summarize the anecdote very quickly. So the first one was interesting. What Lyft saw was that between up to about 8 minutes, between 3 minutes to about 8 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes before getting into double digits, you could have a ride come between 3 minutes to 10 minutes, and people would not drop. People are willing to wait. Right. So 3 minutes to 10 minutes is almost tripling the wait time. If you think about it, going from 3 to 10 is almost more than tripling the wait time, but people are willing to wait for that much time. After 10, then it becomes a problem, because now they want something more urgently. 10 minutes is a lot of lead time for a on-demand marketplace like Lyft, right? But they are willing to wait between 3 and 10. You would see, so coming back to what you said, right, hyper-local marketplaces, sometimes you just don't have, especially when you're starting in a new market, you just don't have enough density. You don't have enough drivers right now. So you may not be able to find a driver within 10 minutes, for example. It's possible, right? So, and you use batching and things like that to alleviate the problem, but it's possible. People are okay with that. On the price side, if you go from $10, let's say as an example, to $10.15, which is, if you think about it, it's a 1.5% increase. The demand would drop off a cliff. So we would kind of joke like people don't know how to value their time because, or how to price their time, because you're more than willing to wait three times as much to find a ride. But if the price goes up by a few cents, 10, 15 cents, your demand is dropping. So that's just how humans are programmed. They are very, very sensitive to price compared to, their own time. This is something we saw there. So ETA of pickup was one metric, price was the other. Of course, number of rides was obviously the company's North Star that, you would report to the Wall Street. It's the same thing on the Shipt side. There is something called on-time delivery, which is on the customer side. When you ordered something, how many of those are coming at the time when you wanted them to be, which is again sort of like an ETA problem, and then obviously cost is the other thing on that side.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So it sounds like Shipt is definitely an operationally intensive marketplace.
Yes.
So what is the day-to-day like for you as a kind of director of product?
My areas are super big and super broad. It's a lot of power, a lot of responsibility at the company. I do work on the shopper side. I said that we batch. So the batching actually, it's the marketplace. I would say the marketplace group of this company is embedded in the shopper side, on the fulfillment side. It's not a fourth vertical. At Lyft and Uber, there's a rider vertical, there's a driver vertical, and there is a marketplace vertical. Here it's the customer, the retailer, and then the shopper side, and the marketplace is embedded. So one part is batching, one part is pricing. As I said, I own the pricing systems here. So shopper earnings, everything that goes into shoppers' pockets, from the time that they come in, for the time that they spend with us to work with us. My day-to-day, honestly, well, of course, I have a team. Part of it is managing the team, managing the products. But I think the things that keep me up at night or keep me most excited is the sense of empowerment that I create, or that our products create, Shipt creates for, economic opportunity, economic equity, or work equity. I like to talk to my customer support team from time to time and get feedback. There's a lot of negative feedback that we get, but a lot of times we get a positive feedback as well, hearing back from shoppers. One of them that I recently saw, which I keep on my desktop, is there was a graduate student, who said that during COVID, for example, was that, Shipt helped him and his pets. He has a couple of dogs. His pets, get through a difficult time in his life and, provide a supplemental income. I was a graduate student, a long time ago, but I can identify and empathize with somebody like that, right? Being able to empower somebody like that who is like me at a different point in life. That keeps me very excited and motivated. In terms of, yes, there is an operations team, there's a data science team, there's an engineering team, there's a design team, there's, the usual, it's a big tech company. So there's the usual suspects at the company. I think the other thing that I think keeps me on my toes is pricing is a problem that is very close to my heart. How do we make sure that we are always compensating fairly? And how do we make sure that, that our, how do I put this? The need for profit, for example, or the need for cutting costs, or the need for that does not overpower, the fact that we have to actually compensate people fairly for the honestly, the favor that they are doing by coming and working for us. Honestly, the chance and the opportunity that our shoppers are giving, how do we actually compensate them? How do we actually nourish them, cherish them, and help sustain our marketplace on those principles? So keeping that into all the different product lines that we have a lot of them. We have a lot of different use cases. How do we, as we were talking about in the previous question, how do we make sure that, in different use cases, for example, gas prices and inflation is at an all-time high right now. I'm sure everybody here is bearing the brunt of that. It's in some way or shape or form. So how do we actually make sure that we adjust our rates so that our shoppers feel like they are not, it's not like, Shipt is a exploitative company, for example, but we want to compensate fairly. We want to empower them. We want to create that opportunity. And also across geographies, like you mentioned, right? It's hyper local. So how do we, across geography, across sort of different social statuses. Anybody can come. How do we not have any biases or skews across, for example, ethnic lines, right? What do we disproportionately, are we, or our algorithms, are they actually like disproportionately allocating work to one type of people versus the other? We actually look at these problems, which are sort of almost like public policy problems, if you will, almost at the company, and we take those problems very, very seriously. So
yeah, that's really great points as far as having a responsibility as marketplaces. So
yes.
Cool. So we're going to get into questions here. We actually have a few that want to come on here in a second. But right before we do, so you have some pretty incredible experience at operationally intensive marketplaces. So do you have any tips maybe for early stage marketplace founders or even, product leaders?
First thing, I would quote Paul Graham, who, for people who don't know him, he is one of the original founders of Y Combinator. He said this about Airbnb, and that line stuck with me. He said, do things that don't scale. Which, the Airbnb story is that the founders, Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia, they actually went house to house initially when they started Airbnb to actually get people to sign up as hosts on their platform. If you think about it, everybody in the audience, it's kind of a crazy thing to do, is to actually convince somebody to put some strangers in your house. It's an absolutely crazy thing to do. There is a real value in them being, I'm just always, I don't know how they pulled it off. They have, but there's real value. And actually, I can say that because I was an Airbnb host at one point. So I've been on the other side and I've experienced the product myself. But that, don't be afraid to think about problems which are incredibly unreasonable, right? Don't be afraid to chase those problems. Don't give up. There are, again, if I think of an idea, I will always think of how did the Airbnb guys do this? Like if they can do that, you should absolutely have conviction in your idea. Of course, don't have confirmation bias as well, right? At some point you have to say that, is your conviction clouding your judgment? So be reasonable, but don't be afraid to think about things that are just impossible and go after them, right? So that's number one, I would say that. And the second thing is, I would say this was something I heard from somebody at a talk that I gave about search pricing, coming back to that topic. This was a person from Texas, Houston specifically. And I was talking about search pricing and how, it's a way to, the idea we just discussed is how it is a way to bring equilibrium back to the marketplace. This person, they had founded a company just before COVID. And during COVID, they had a clear opportunity to actually be aggressive and raise prices, but they were defensive and they never raised the prices. And their company never actually broke even because they never maximized their revenue. Given COVID, given different things, long story short, they were just too defensive in their strategy to take a chance. And the person admitted to me after that talk, he was like, for our company to sustain, we were bleeding our own money, our investment money. We should have actually just charged the customers. And I'm sure they would have been willing to pay that, but we never did. We were just very defensive. We thought if we did that, the business would collapse. But hey, that's just a hypothesis. You have to try that. You have to try it on a few customers and see if it really does. Don't be scared of taking chances in the marketplace. So do those two things. Those are the two examples that come to my mind. Don't be afraid to dream big and chase your dreams, and look at some best practices. If it works at Uber, why wouldn't it work for you? If it works for Lyft, why wouldn't it work for you? Just take some of those playbooks and run with it.
Those are two really great tips and examples. So thanks for sharing with us on that. So cool. So we're going to get into questions here. Hey, Brandon, do you want to come on?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for doing this. This is really valuable for me specifically. So I had a question. You mentioned around inventory and the negative customer experience if you guys don't have the inventory at Shipt. Have you guys decided not to show that inventory or to show that inventory as not available? And if you have decided, what went into that decision? And secondarily, with physical items, similar to with Lyft, if there's a physical item that's out of supply, let's say it's one of those situations similar to out of a ball game with Lyft, do you do surge pricing with that item? to try to bring the market back into equilibrium? And what data points, if you do, go into what pricing you make for that popular item at that time?
Yeah, those are great questions, Brandon. I can clearly see that you are somebody who has your, the rubber to the road. So I appreciate the questions, first of all. So I think the first question was,
you show the item, or do you show it as
do we
empty?
show it or not? Yeah, right. I would, so for my response is that I don't work on that side. So don't quote me on it, but I'll tell you what I think happens. There is a machine learning algorithm that tries to predict whether or not an item will be in stock. That I know. But what is the outcome of the algorithm in terms of what does the customer see? So I'll cover that in a second. There are two parts to this problem. One part is within a reasonable degree, we can allow, we should actually show, even if we think something will be out of stock at that point in time, we should show it. And the reason being that a lot of this shopping exchange, at least today, in the way product is designed, both for Shipt as well as Instacart, a lot of that actually happens in the moment. So if an item is not found, so let me give you a very specific example. There's a specific, let's say, brand of 2% milk that somebody has ordered, right? That you have ordered as a customer. Now that brand of 2% milk is not available, but another one is, and it's just $1 higher. Now in the moment, right? So the fact that we allowed you to order it gives us the opportunity, or gives the shopper the opportunity in the moment to ask you the question, I'm not finding X, can I actually substitute that with Y? If we never took that opportunity, if we never showed that, then we wouldn't know that you wanted milk in the first place. So up to a reasonable degree, that makes sense. It doesn't make sense if, you place 10 items and all 10 of them are like the shopper is asking you to substitute all 10 of them. That just doesn't make any sense. And then, where do you draw the line? Like now, do you start showing items which don't even exist in the store? Like where do you draw the line, right? For example, because they were pulled from the aisles or something like that. So I think that up to a reasonable degree that the algorithms can predict that this item will be available, or there is a reasonable substitution that could be made. It makes sense. And also there is, again, as I said, there is a fine line between how many of those chances do we want to, out of 10 items, do we want to do it 20%, 30% of the time? Or do we want to do it 100% of the time? So both of those things are, it's very analytical, and there's a machine learning algorithm that tracks all of this. But both of those things are sort of what we keep in mind before showing something to a user, to a customer. And then the second part was, do we search for a particular item? It doesn't quite work like that, Brandon. I mean, searching on particular items, I think where you are coming from is, if an item is exclusive and everybody, let's say, take a simple example, turkey on Thanksgiving. Just make it more, concrete. If it is so exclusive, do you want to mark up the price of turkey by something? Some markup happens. I'm not gonna deny that some markup happens for some of the items, but the pricing, generally the search pricing, actually works on an entire order level. It doesn't work on an individual item level, because we are not in the business of policing. At least right now, we are not in the business of policing what should the base cost of an item be. And the other risk is, if we do mark up the price of an item, think about it like this. If we do mark up the price of an item, 2x, 3x, 4x, it actually might make the retailer look bad. Because they might think that, right? Because they might think that my product, somebody went into my store, because the way the shopping experience works is a customer goes into a store, into a retailer store, let's say Whole Foods, and then picks up an item in that store, because the shopping is happening at the store. Now, if we mark up something 4x, 5x, you as a customer might think that Whole Foods is actually the one because you don't know what the underlying price is. So you have to be very careful about this. I mean, it could also open you up for some liability if you do that. And the other fact is, people will just not trust your system and just stop coming and shopping with you. So the way you do it is, you generally have a price. When you do the price, the search pricing, the right way to think about it is, it's more like Amazon, for example. It's more like an Amazon or a USPS, which is you basically pay more for instant gratification, which is if you want a 1-day delivery or 2-day delivery or a few hours delivery, then you actually pay up a premium price. You don't actually do it on the contents of what is inside that delivery. If that makes sense.
Yes, that makes sense. For some reason, I thought that there may be items that you need to reset the equilibrium in the market for, sort of like how you reset.
Turkeys on Thanksgiving, like that's an example, right? If there's other things like apple pudding or something else, for example, that people are ordering. You want to probably mark up the turkeys on Thanksgiving. You want to, yeah.
Thanks.
That's a really great question. Hey, Noel, do you want to jump on?
Yeah. Hey, Vishal. Thanks so much for the talk. My name is Noel Roberts. I'm in the prop tech space. So I have a real estate marketplace for off-market homes that's attempting to leverage technology to uncover hidden inventory in the real estate space. So there's a lot of things that you've said that are very analogous. For example, if a buyer is looking for a particular property, nothing on market matches their criteria. How do we, leverage tech to go to the off-market route to find them something that matches their criteria, engage that owner, et cetera, to explore a transaction? Sort of one of the key problems we're attempting to solve. My question is less probably like in the weeds, and it's probably just more like the business of on demand. I've used Shipt before, a great service, but the on-demand business really kind of surged during the pandemic, and just from headline reading, it seems to be struggling for a lot of companies where it's high burn, it's really hard to manage. I'm just wondering, how you think Shipt is doing in terms of not being one of those companies that really surged when people were indoors and et cetera. Like, how do you fare sort of over the next year and a half? I'm just wondering your perspective on that.
Yeah, fair question. I will answer that with a caveat that I can't disclose too much of company strategy, obviously.
Sure.
But I will say one thing. I'll start with one example. Uber, for the first time in its 12, 13 years history, recorded profit. So it can be done. And Uber started with the rideshare. For the longest time, they brought on a completely new use case. They were trying many use cases, by the way. Just to jog everybody's memory, they were trying Uber Elevate, which was flying cars, flying taxis. They were trying self-driving vehicles, right? They were trying, bikes and scooters. Jump. They acquired a company called Jump here. I live in San Francisco, so the bikes were, on the street everywhere. They tried a lot of different things in a lot of different business areas. They also tried Eats, and Eats is now a profitable business, and they have other enterprise verticals and so on and so forth. After a long time, almost 13, 14 years of existence, I think it started in, if I'm correct, it started in 2010 or 2011. So almost 11, 12 years of existence, it became profitable. They tried a lot of different things, right? For us, it's a little different. Again, without giving a lot of what we are trying to do. We are owned by Target. So we are an acquisition. Target had acquired us. Yeah. It was actually the biggest acquisition in the history of Target back in 2018. So obviously they saw value in investing in the company, and in the founding team. So that changes the equation a little bit for us. It changes the dynamic a little bit because we don't have to report to the street. We are not a public company. We are not looking to go public. We don't actually have to report to the street. But my teams, especially the things we talked about, batching as well as earnings, for example, are two teams which directly impact P&L for the company. And we have to report to our finance teams, which then report to Target and so on and so forth. I would say that companies shift, Noel. They shift, right? Use cases shift. What was relevant and what kept the company going, or what increased revenues last year or the year before, may or may not be a valid use case now. You're right, that demand is cooling off. That's it's out in the news. That's not a wrong statement. But hey, we were able to excite people. We were able to capture some interest and imagination of consumers back in pandemic. And we did actually generate some profits and some we built up our coffers a little bit through that. Now we can use that to actually invest in some other business areas. So it's not like a be all end all. Like tomorrow, who knows, right? People might automate grocery deliveries through drones. That's one. I know that Amazon has been trying drone delivery in some rural parts of they have been trying it for a while. Google actually apparently was the first one to acquire drone licenses even before Amazon. This is a little surprising, not everybody knows. But the first FAA licenses for flying drones throughout the nation, they were the first ones. So people, different companies do this. It is still, I will say that it is a very, very strong use case for us even today. It is the highest revenue generator for us, but there are new things that we are trying to.
Awesome. That was a great question. So see if we can get one more question in here. Hey, Colton, do you want to come on?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. First off, Vishal, thank you for your time today. I have a question more related to the product side of your role at Shipt or Lyft, whichever one makes the most sense. I'm kind of curious to how you and your team kind of assess the impact of the updates, the new features, the things that you guys are pushing out as a team, and how that kind of correlates in, I'm sure, an environment where you're never stop working on new things all the time. And so whether that's rolling certain features back or making further updates to them or, celebrating success over a certain feature and its impacts. I'm curious to hear maybe if there's any processes or ideas that you could share around how that works at, again, either Lyft or Shipt.
Yeah, it's a great question, Colton. It's a very execution specific question, I think, is what you're asking. I would say that I would answer that in three parts. Number one is it depends on who you ask what success means. Even within the company, sometimes what success means to one team might not mean success to the other. Second is you should execute with. We follow a culture of experimentation, as any big tech company follows. So incremental experimentation, and for the purpose of the experiment, we will kind of pin that experiment down to certain success metrics for the experiment only. And then, measure in a rigorous data sciencey way, in a statistically significant way, whether we are moving the numbers that the experiment was expected to move. We go with an expectation, and then we see whether our actuals match the expectation or not. So that's the second part. And then the third part is don't be afraid. Sometimes, coming back to the first point, is even if success means different things to different people, don't be actually afraid to push the envelope if you feel that that is one of the parties, for example, is or one of the teams is disproportionately getting benefit versus the others. Let me give you a simple example. So one of the things that there are two teams at the company. Let me give you a very simple example. There is a team that measures customer success or shopper success, and there is a team that measures, let's say, profitability, right? Now, if you make a change to earnings, let's say, where, let's say that you optimize your algorithm. There is an algorithm that sort of calculates how the earnings, what will every shopper get paid if they finish a job. There's a machine learning algorithm that tries to estimate that and the payout. So let's say that you change the algorithm, and let's say that you are now paying a little bit more than what it was on a net basis. Week after week, if you look at it, now you're paying $1 million more than what you were paying last week because the algorithm shifted. Now, is that good or bad? Right? Coming back to what you were saying, Colton. So if you ask the customer success team, customer service team who deals with shoppers, they like it because now you're offloading more money, giving more money back to the shoppers, and you're increasing economic opportunity. But on the other hand, the finance would be like, this is not what we wanted because our goal is profitability. So that's a different success metric. I think that is something, Mike, that you asked me before. That is the beauty of working for marketplaces, is that it is a game of balance. It's a hard problem, genuinely, right? It's hard to convince everybody that you're doing right all the time. And that is the reason why marketplaces, once they are up, they are so defensible. It's very difficult to build them and scale them. But once you do, you know that you are solving something very meaningful for the parties who are involved in the marketplace. In this example, right, that finding that the word that I always like to tell myself whenever I'm pushing product or launching products, the one word I anchor myself on is balance.
It has to be a balanced decision. It doesn't have to skew one side. It doesn't have to be done because, my teams have proved that, we can, save like, $50 million next year. That's not the right way. Is it going to have a long-term impact? Will shoppers actually stop coming because they are seeing that reduction in the economic opportunity in the platform? Will they actually stop coming and working for us? Those are the things that we actually take a very holistic point of view. And those are the things that we actually look at when making decisions. But also, coming back to what you said, there are these long-term metrics, company metrics. There are, 6 or 7 company-wide metrics. Customer satisfaction is one metric. Obviously, revenue is a metric. Number of sales. Depending on who you ask, how many partners, retail partners do we have? How many members, like retention of members? How many orders members? Depending on what teams you ask, there are different success metrics for all those teams, which kind of roll up to the company. That's how we do our OKRs as well. We roll down from the OKRs based on the goals that are set. But again, coming back to what I was saying, the success may or may not mean the same thing to different people even within the same company. So use judgment, use your balance, use good techniques like experimentation, etc. Pin it down, and from there, slowly but steadily, incrementally build your marketplace is what I would say.
Thanks a lot.
Awesome. That's a great last question to wrap things up. But wow, Vishal, this is a really great chat. I know we bounced around a little bit, but definitely covered lots of ground, and I feel like we could almost do a group chat on each topic, such as pricing, routing, and everything. So thanks for taking the time to join us here today. I did have one last question for you though, and before we wrap things up, and that's if you were to go back to right before you joined Lyft or maybe Shipt, what would you tell yourself about marketplaces?
Yeah, I think I would, if I went back to my 8-year-old, 10-year-old self, I think I would say I would use the word balance, and I would use the word patience, right? It is a sum of the parts. It's a lot of different small things that you do, incremental things that you do. As a product manager, now I'm a product leader, I have a team, but as a product manager, doing these, this is how exactly I learned and I blossomed in product and I developed my chops, is running experiments, doing these tests, sometimes doing very, very incremental things. Like there is a famous example where Gmail, for example, changed the color of the blue on the original Gmail, the original version. They changed the shade of blue, and by doing that, they saw a 7% lift with one specific shade of blue in engagement, in the number of people actually coming back. The daily active users, more and more people were coming back to that particular color versus the other. It sounds very tedious, right? If you think of who cares about a color of the background color in Gmail? But actually those things matter. It is the compounding principle. It is the 1% rule, which is, you make the 1% change, but the effect of that change actually adds up as time goes on. So don't be shy, and don't, as long as the results are meaningful and they are showing you something, that as long as the data is showing you that there is value in launching something, don't let your own biases or your own, this sounds very tedious, this is we should do big things. Don't get caught up into the fact that every shot that you take is going to change the world in some way. A lot of times it's, you have to make these incremental changes, and you have to learn the discipline of building this, slowly, patiently, and carefully, and learn the balance. And then from there on, be patient, play the long game. And then, eventually, and you will know, I think at some point when you do cross that chasm, right, you will know that your marketplace is now defensible. It is, it has enough liquidity, and you are actually generating value for the real world. So I would advise myself to go back and think a little differently, for sure.
No, those are great insights to leave us with here today. And last but not least, time for a quick plug. Where can we keep up with you at?
Yes. Please connect with me on my LinkedIn. I have a very open door, open Zoom, open LinkedIn policy. Please connect with me on my LinkedIn. I'm available. My handle is just VEE. So LinkedIn/in/VEE. So just connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love to hear from other founders, from other leaders working in the marketplace spaces. I am always looking to pay it forward. I think, Mike, thank you for the opportunity for having me. One of the things that I love about your community is that it is very authentic. The word that comes to mind. It's very genuine. It's a lot of passionate people trying to, influence change in the world. And I would love to be in touch with these people and, just pay it forward and advice wherever I can. So if you guys have any questions, any advice that you need, don't hesitate to reach out for sure.
You're a big reason why it's so awesome. So thanks again for joining us here today.
Thank you guys. Nice to see you.